Anyways, first thing, thank you everybody for coming. This is an IOU meeting, and I'm going to just read you what IOU stands for and means. And it is about Intellectuals Unite, which stands for IOU Alive. And it is because we are trying to do something positive in these dangerous and stressful times. You know, these are words of Vivienne, and I'm just reading them to you. It's a book club, really, actually. And she always thought reading matters, and reading is the most essential, part of what you should do, apart from maybe eating and sleeping. And every time you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, you gain perspective on the world that you live in. It's important to know the past. It's an anchor, and it gives you power over your own life. You start to make good decisions, and you have knowledge, and knowledge is attractive to people, to other people. Your duty to your life is to understand the world you live in. Get a life. You get out what you've put in. Who is an intellectual? He who wishes to understand the world and his place in it. He's trying to understand a complete picture. Knowledge gives us our past, present, and future. And knowledge is what defines our species, Homo sapiens. IOU is open to all. The present world suffers from the isolation of intellectuals, therefore, to that extent, everyone is isolated. It is through culture that we link together. The 20th century, abundant culture and accepted consumption. It's about forget the past and follow the times. The future will take care of itself. Consumption feeds austerity. IOU can build, we will sustain. We are not going away, we are all Homo sapiens. Politicians, we will overwhelm you with our humanity. The voice of Homo sapiens will trap you in your palace of Westminster. What can we do? Destroy the rotten financial system? That would be victory. The only way to do that is through peace and love and promote green economy. This is a manifesto of many of Vivienne's writings and manifestos written 2017 for an actual IOU meeting, which we are having here tonight. And I've just read, what she created then. We are here. I want to thank as well where we are, this gallery, Apolitical. It's becoming a little second home to us, and I'm really glad that this space exists. And again, thank you to especially Becky and George for having us tonight here, And as I said, it's a book club, but we always have interesting people who are telling us what is going on in this world. And tonight we've got two great ladies, and I'd like to introduce first Barbora Bukovská, and please join me. Barbora is a lawyer, human rights lawyer, and an activist. And she has a long career in human rights litigations, fighting discrimination and defending free speech. And in 2013, with Gavin McFadden and Julian Assange, she founded the Courage Foundation, where Vivienne was a trustee as well. And she supported people like Jeremy Hammond, Barbara, and like Snowden and Barry and Jeremy Hammond. And Barbara is a senior director of law and policy at Article 19, which is a global freedom of expression organization. She's going to talk about all of this now. You have put a title here, which I love, and if I may repeat that. Under the cloud, over the world, the age of everything and companies.
Everything companies, yes.
Yeah, and everything companies. So
should I start?
Please.
I don't know, can you hear me? Is this close? I will also look at my notes. I'm sorry for that. I didn't bring my glasses, so I will not. I have these long notes, but I will not be able to see them. So a senior moment there. But also reminded me of Vivienne, because the last time I heard her speaking, she was speaking at a wedding, and she had like a long notes, longer than this. And then she accidentally stuck them in a cake, into a wedding cake. Well, maybe on purpose. But, so hope that doesn't happen. And no food around here, so no cake will suffer harm. And thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be connected to you. Andreas already said what is the topic of my talk, but I want to start with a question and ask you, when was the last time you really made a choice? Think about that. And you might say, well, I make a lot of choices every day. I made a choice to come here. I decide what sort of toothpaste I'm going to buy or what sort of Netflix shows I'm going to binge on. I can decide who I'm going to vote for. So you think I make many choices, as many as I can, and I'm in full control over my life. But I have a bad news for you. You are as free as a pigeon in a park who thinks that they are picking on their own snacks. Because the crumbs are right there, but someone else has decided which crumbs you are going to eat and when. And I fancy myself as an expert on choice and freedom, and you also said that, like Vivienne believed in looking in the past, and I have some experience with that because I grew up in a communist dictatorship of communist Czechoslovakia, a totalitarian dictatorship in a family which, let's say, was not very much on a friendly side with the regime. And thanks to the circumstances, I actually, although I'm a lawyer now, I had a short stint working in a factory on assembly line making mechanical brooms. In hindsight, it was the great experience. It was maybe the best time of my life. But I'm not gonna. I'm happy to say why. But, I'm not here to kind of give you a sob story of my childhood, but I'm mentioning this because people in the West, they think that living in a totalitarian dictatorship, it's permanent blunt force, boots in the face, constant oppression, doing everything under the, threat of a gun. Because when you watch Hollywood movies, or even like I watched recently, this Chernobyl, and it was kind of a joke. Although I grew up in this kind of dissident family and all these circumstances, I do not remember it that way. I actually remember it as living in a constant constraint and of knowing that the actions you do or words you say will not reach the people who need to hear them the most. And I carry this as a memory of absence. And this actually brings me to the topic you came to hear, which is about the lack of freedom. It's about the control which we are living under. Because what is happening to us these days and the circumstances we are living under now very much reminds me what I have experienced during my childhood. Back then, it was, totalitarian state seizing the means of production. And now it's very similar, although on different ideological grounds. And this lack of freedom has 5 logos. They are Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta. GAMAM in short. Obviously, there are many more companies, and I know some people don't like this abbreviation, and there are also many, many more companies, depending where you live, but I will focus on these 5 companies. You might say, Google doesn't control me, Amazon doesn't control me, I don't shop on Amazon, but let me tell you 5 ways how they actually control you. It's a pity that I don't have some sort of projection here, because if I show it to the people in my work, I show it on a pyramid. So imagine it's as a pyramid, and on the top of it is control over the information and control over your consumption choices. And I'm sure that you heard this. Google knows what you are looking for, Meta knows how you're feeling, then Amazon controls what you shop, Microsoft runs your office, and then Apple locks your phone. But they are really now the gatekeeper between you and the world. An example, so for instance, Google, and they all do this for profit and total control and surveillance. So for instance, Google, which started as search engine and advertising, they purchased YouTube. And then they also integrated this double-click technology across their services. So they can decide how information is delivered to you and how it is monetized across the platforms. Or then later they acquired Fitbit. Some people can wear this, but it's not just adding another service to their production line. They are also gaining access to the health data, and this feeds directly to their advertising network. So they really know what you think, and they influence all these choices. So, and this goes beyond the information. So it's a bit of nostalgic to call them just tech companies, and that's why the title of this talk, which is Everything Company. So this is just the first layer on the top of the pyramid. The second layer is apps and operating systems. So for those who are not technologists in this room, you will know that Apple and Google, they have big control through their app stores and software distribution. So the companies and developers that want to reach their users, they must use these platforms. And then, obviously, these 2 platforms, they can decide which apps are going to be available, which can be distributed. And they are very good in blocking competition and preventing new people coming to the market. Because they also, and even if you are on their platforms, they decide which platform is visible and available, and they are also charging huge fees to developers and can cripple the smaller companies. And that's the second layer. The third layer is the data centers and cloud. And again, you might say, how is, cloud controlling me? I just, have my data, stored somewhere, so, who cares? But Amazon Web Services, like the AWS, Google Cloud, and Microsoft, they don't only host websites, they also host governments, businesses, healthcare systems, tax records, and critical public data. So Amazon, I found, powers 40% of Fortune 500 companies, entire governments. So if they change their terms, they can, block access to critical, data, and governments and businesses, they became so reliant on these, services for sensitive information, and, a single policy change or a kind of outage can have affect ability of entire nation to access their data. This also has impact on democracy. Recently, there was cloud outage during Netherlands election, so people couldn't vote. People couldn't follow what was happening in real time in the media. People who wanted to travel and see when they can go and vote, they couldn't check their transportation system. So there you go. But that's still not everything. We only went through 3 layers. 4th layer is energy, because they are also now more and more acquiring energy which powers digital world. So a part of data center and the cloud, they own energy sources and supplies chain. And they don't actually need to even anymore rely on the national grids, because they are building private and self-sustaining infrastructure. So they don't only control the data we generate, but also the energy which is needed to process them. Again, example, last year, Amazon purchased nuclear plant called Talent for 650 million, and they have now exclusive control over this massive portion of energy. Microsoft, same year, 10.5 gigawatts of nuclear and gas energy from Constellation and Helion. And also Google signed these long-term agreements over solar and wind. So energy control as well. And then the final layer is control over rare materials, which they need for the chips and the batteries. So again, Amazon and Microsoft, they invested in lithium and copper mines, which needs this material, as I said. And Google is now involved in rare earth processing. And by owning these physical resources, which they need then for like technological infrastructure, it closes all this loop of control, and they control entire supply chain from raw materials to end users' consumption, either through information or other goods. So that's the situation we are in. Now, I'm sure this is like super depressing, and beating you over head with it. So like, what can we do with it? A lot of people will tell you like nothing. Governments will tell you nothing. We are doomed. But I think that we can do a lot. Although I also have to add, and Helen will talk about this, with all this mess involved, they also, another depressing point, they are having huge environmental impact. So these data centers, they are consuming, according to the information I found, 3% of global electricity. And that's supposed to increase by 8% till next year. They also need a lot of water. And here you say, like, why do they need so much water? Like, data centers, it's just, engineers who are working, they need to get a drink. But in fact, they actually, these data centers are producing so much heat, which needs to be cooled. And for that, they need fresh water. And I read somewhere, I should have checked specifically how much I read, that Google needs as much water every day as entire UK, which is a huge proportion. And this is fresh water. I know this is recorded. I'm not sure that this is the exact date, but something like that. And they used to put these data centers and rely on this water in the north, but now with the climate crisis, it's getting warmer there, and there's a big problem in countries which have water scarcity. And I even heard that they are planning now to put this data center on the ocean, which is like crazy. Because warming the ocean is going to be crazy. But anyhow, so they are not environmentally friendly, as they would like to say. And with the greenwashing, they want you to think so, but it's a lie. So going back now, another depressing point, what can you do about it? So governments say not much, but I think that we can actually do a lot. So I will tell you what I'm doing as a human rights lawyer working for this free speech organization called Article 19. And I'm actually basing this on the well-tested methods of resistance, which I learned during my childhood in communist dictatorship. And I can summarize it as 4 key powers we have. So the first one, and this is what also the dissidents, including in the family of my parents, they use the power of moral alternative. And they rely on international human rights as basis, strategic demands on the governments to hold these totalitarian regimes accountable. And I'm doing exactly the same for these companies. We are demanding that the governments actually regulate them, and they can regulate them. We are also asking that the governments put a very good legislation on all grounds, and they are also enforcing this legislation. So once you have a good legislation, you need to enforce it. Invest in the regulators, and not just in human rights, but also in competition and preventing their dominant and monopolistic and exploitative behavior. We actually have a political momentum for this. With all this, I'm sure some of you heard this digital sovereignty stuff which is going on. So we are demanding that the governments take an action on it. We are also demanding that the governments actually stop buying products from these companies, because the governments rely on these companies with our tax money, and they can stop it. So no more, I can't see any reason why government, municipality, healthcare service, university should be using these services. They shouldn't. So that's power number one, power of moral alternative, relying on human rights. Some people might not believe in human rights. I believe in them, being a human rights lawyer, but also I think that, it's strategy for coping with everything. So I don't think we should throw it out of the window. So the second power is the power of alternative structures. And here, again, this is what the dissidents were using. So they were creating this, sense of shared responsibility and a community through the parallel structures in all areas of society, in science, in law, in international relations, in technology. And I remember in my childhood there were these underground universities, underground churches, underground gatherings. So that's also what we have. And actually what you are doing here, this is the parallel structure. Another option is the investment in different sort of technologies yourself, support open source. I very much believe in it. It's a bit more difficult with a cloud, because open source also needs the cloud. But again, we have other technologies we can use. Then the third power, and thank you for bearing with me. I'm sure that I'm overrunning my 10 minutes. The third power is what I call the power of reaching across divides. Because this, again, in the communism, they were very good in finding alliances across different ideological lines. Charter 77 in my country, in Czechoslovakia, they united, communists, former communists, even, revolutionary Marxists. They also people from, religious communities, different backgrounds. And they have this, again, this, community, which was free, which was informal, open association, and it allowed people from different convictions to work together. A very important group there were artists and intellectuals, because they use their work to articulate the dissent and inspire resistance. So I also see this group more like a irrigation network. So people from different things, they can come, they get water, they drop the drops everywhere. So water and knowledge reaches everywhere. And then the fourth area is the power of individual responsibility. I know this is super controversial, because many people will tell you they are much more powerful than you. So your personal choices, don't make so much difference. You can't fix climate change with, just careful recycling. And it's a privilege anyhow. I say, I'm not going to use Amazon, so I'm just going to use locally. Everybody doesn't have that privilege. But I still believe in power of individual responsibility. I think that our choices matter. And I'm actually greatly inspired by our first democratic president, Václav Havel. And since you said this is a book club, so there is a very good essay which had transformative impact on my life. It's called The Power of Powerless. I'm sure you can find it somewhere. Power of Powerless, 1978. And he articulated this philosophy of resistance. And he proposed how people who are living under lie, how they can live in truth. And from doing so, they can change the world. So again, personal choices, they need to be a part of the big struggle, but I believe in them. I encourage you to do so if you can. And I know I spoke way too long, but
That's great, Barbora.
last thing before I finish, and Helen needs to speak as well, I think that I need to finish with giving a tribute to Vivienne. Because when I met Vivienne first time, it was at the Ecuadorian embassy when she came to see Julian. And I'm sure that many people here came to see Julian there, and you will remember this was the most depressing building in the whole world. It had, bad lighting, bad carpets, bad air, more cameras than plants. And the first thing which came out of Vivienne's mouth when I first time met her was something like, this is what the system does to things it cannot control. It gives it beige walls. And then in 10 minutes, with her, it was like a full seminar, everything which is broken. So she went from, Julian's case to banks, to capitalism, to, tech, secrecy, right to live without being mined for data, and so on. And it was, really mind-blowing for me to see how she managed to connect all these things and all these wires that the politicians make you think are separate circuits. And then I also realized why she and Julian went along so well, because both of them understood that revolution has different phases. And also what Helen is going to speak later about environment, this climate crisis, predatory capitalism, technology, human rights, which I'm saying, they are not different problems. They are one and same business model, and they are the same target. So I think it feels honest to say today that I met Vivienne in diplomatic premises. And she was not diplomatic. She didn't do diplomacy. She also believed in the power of the powerless. And once you heard her to tie all those things together into one line of attack, it became very hard. It actually became impossible to go back to thinking that any of this is normal. And I very much hope that you will think the same.
Wow. Thank you very much, Barbora. We are supposed to have some questions and answers. I don't know if... Are there any questions from the audience to Barbara? I'm sure she would be more than glad to try to answer, if there is any.
Sorry, did you say that Amazon owns a nuclear power station?
Yes. It did. Yes, last year. Yeah, 2024. Talent nuclear plant. Talent, 650 million.
In Estonia.
In Estonia?
I don't know where it is. It's Talent. The power station is called Talent. It's not in Estonia, yeah. But it's not that they are investing in all of this.
I've heard that
It's crazy.
nuclear power stations for AI as well. They've
Yeah.
got miniature nuclear stations they're going to start pretty soon.
And with all of this like AI, it's gonna get even worse.
Yeah.
I say AI in quotes because AI is a very careful, very clever PR spin on what is going on. But yeah, please.
I've got a question. Thank you for that. I've really enjoyed that. So I come from Nottingham. And in Nottingham, we had people called the Luddites. I don't know if you know about them.
Luddites, yes, of course.
And I'm just wondering, because now we talk about Luddites as a negative, anti-technology. But I'm wondering whether we need a Luddite movement, a nouveau Luddite movement against AI, against the technology that is clearly damaging us.
Yeah, I think that it's. I think that what we need is. It's a very good point. It's not the technology itself. It's data-driven capitalism. And that's what we need to regulate. Because, this technology actually is AI or whatever it's called. It's not new. It's been with us for many years. And some of it actually doesn't work and has never worked. And we are being sold that, you need to have a technology for all of this. So it's not that we want to destroy this technology, but and also this is what I'm doing in my work, we want to challenge this techno-solutionism. Because, they want to stick techno solution to problems we don't need techno. So last week I was reading in the British press that they want to reduce the school absences for children through some app. It's like, why? Why do we need an app?
Yeah.
Invest. Why are you buying some stupid app instead, which is gonna cost a lot of money? Why don't we invest in teachers, right? So this is something which we can. So it's not that go and break the data centers or kind of destroy them. Be my guest, if you want to do so, it's not going to help. But, we need to resist this kind of believing that AI is our destiny and it's going to solve things. AI is also many things. As I said, a lot of it doesn't work. it's going to burst at some point, 100%. But, and also, like, if you read the studies, I just read this morning this study by MIT, which is Massachusetts Institute of Technology, you know, top-notch. They said that actually 95% of companies, private companies, found that they are not improving productivity. And it, you know, doesn't work. So, and that's why these companies are trying to force this on the public infrastructure and on the government, on, you know, public services, because when also it gets passed, then they will have to be bailed. So this is why I'm putting a pressure on the governments, on municipalities, as I said, you know, do not use this company. Or if you need to use something, build your own infrastructure. So you are not dependent, but also you can control it. But, you know, refuse and also fight this data-driven economy, which, you know, is crazy, rather than breaking phones or going without phone. So that's my position on this issue. And if you call that Luddite, maybe.
I mean, I'm Vivienne's son, Ben, by the way. It was nice to meet you. My question is, this information that has been bought or used, what they're acquiring in these companies, things like your preferences and, you know, your personality, but anyway, but then and they've got but how do they actually control? How is this? I mean, how is this a bad thing? It's a stupid question, but because they give you, you know, if I'm looking for something, they'll tell me something that's similar to that. You know, it starts helping you to you know, narrow down your search and whatever. It does suggest things to me that I might actually be interested in. I've bought a few of these. So that side of it doesn't bother me, that they know, because I tell people anyway in my day-to-day life what I like and what I don't like, and that's the same information. It's just so. How exactly does the you know, Google or whatever use this information against me? Because in a way, it's I am in control of what I like and what I don't like.
Okay, so congratulations that you think so, because, you know, these companies have spent billions of money to think to convince you to think otherwise. So, like, the fact that you think this probably, you know, if it doesn't work on you, success, right? Yeah. But it might, right? But it might. So I tell you, for example, so, like, you know, you are going to what you see on your phones and when you look for the information is not the best information out there. It's not everything which is out there. It's what they pre-select for you. And, you know, they actually don't want you to give you the information which is going to be useful to you or which is going to be you engaged as a citizen. They want to give you the information which is going to be minute for profit and for advertisement. So number one, even if you go on, let's say, Amazon, you think that, you know, I'm going to use the, you know, cheapest thing or like the best thing. But it's not like that. The studies actually show that when you go and buy on Amazon, they don't show you the best thing. I think some studies said that the best thing is actually on the 16th page only. What you see...
I kind of know these things myself, so I don't go on Amazon to buy things.
But many people do. Many people do. Or, you know, you go and you look at the restaurant. If you go on even everything which you see when you go online, is curated for you. There might be different models, so because, you know, you can even choose a better system, and this is also something I'm working on, like making them to allow competitors to come to the market. So, for example, a lot of people who use these services that are unable to leave it, let's say, like WhatsApp, right? A lot of people are on WhatsApp. If I want to leave WhatsApp, I need to leave everybody who is on WhatsApp, and I will be limited through the way how I communicate. So what we are arguing is that these services need to be interoperable. So you would not need to use this platform, use this product, this app, to communicate with people who don't have it. An example is a bank. You can send money through different bank accounts without having, you know, Barclays account or, you know, Santander or whatever. Or, you know, if I send an email, I can send from Gmail to Yahoo or whatever, right? But you can't do this through these apps. So if these apps are interoperable, if you have like interface through which you can communicate, you can easily go and pick a different app. and communicate with the people who don't have it. So that's something actually which is coming in EU, because there is this new legislation called Digital Services Act, which is kind of going to oblige them to do so. They are resisting, but whatever. Or even some people, use Facebook or whatever, Instagram and so on, and that platform does everything. They decide your feed, but they also decide what they remove and not. So it would be much more competitive if you could choose on their platform who is going to do that for you, you as a user. So giving choice to the users, and then it allows also better companies to come, better competitors with more privacy, more human rights, more ethics to have it. So different competition, disrupting this behavior, but also fighting this model of data mining and advertisement and profit-driven economy. Oh, sorry.
You made a very convincing argument, and I find your conclusion that individualism is a very powerful tool also makes sense to me. But what I would have expected you to say as an international law expert is to rely more on the UN structure and international law, which I think is not the answer. But I want to know what your thoughts are about the UN and whether that could one day become a tool that could police this, which is clearly an issue that needs to be resolved.
Well, UN is the mechanism which was created to make states accountable. So this is why I said kind of like a little bit at the back, like I don't want to throw human rights away, because human rights were invented to give you the power against the state, right? So you don't claim human rights against commercial platforms. This is kind of different contractual relationship. So that's how like traditionally UN and this human rights system were created. But to me, the bottom of it, or the kind of like underlying issue, was to prevent abuse of power when the system were created. So I think that we need to evolve the system to also target the companies and target this excessive use of power. We will need to have different tools for it, because currently, human rights system, you can only do it through the state. UN, a long conversation, is also kind of multi-state system, very slow, and now, also be, underfunded. I don't think the solution lies just in the UN, but I believe it lies in the human rights system and reclaiming human rights against these companies which are now more powerful than the states. But, those who are lawyers here in, rights, they might disagree. Yes,
So
two people.
If you're saying the government doesn't control the companies, who does control the companies? Because surely it's not the shareholders.
Yeah. I think the government should control these companies, and this is the problem. So, and also shareholder activism is like, good luck with that, because, in Meta, it's Zuckerberg and, Jeff Bezos or whatever. So, but, I think that there is a power of the company. If you believe in, if you're not an anarchist and you don't believe that we need a state to have a decent society, maybe you will disagree with me, but I still think that if we have a social contract with the state needs to get a role here. And there are different tools, as I said, laws, and enforce those laws. What are the regulators for? Let's enforce those laws. Let's give them like a real sanction and real to get real damages, because when the regulators give them a fine, it's like Google makes it in one day. We recently won a case in Nigeria, just Google just, it was Meta just paid out of it, as that doesn't even matter. So it needs to be kind of real sanction, real financial impact on it, or even get them, out of the country, because people are like, Google will leave, or this, Meta will leave, UK. I'm like, okay, good riddance of a bad crap, and unless they improve their behavior, go. There will be others. So.
Isn't the bigger problem that we get bigger than the power issue with these 5 companies, that we get more and more disconnected within society? That we all live in our own realities. We all get our own feed. There's very little we all experience as together. I've seen an interesting interview with Paul Altman, the founder of ChatGPT, or the inventor, that he says in about 5 to 10 years there won't be even movies and films that we watch together anymore. Like we will come home and we will create our own film and we say we want this expert to be in it. It should be about UFOs taking place in Nevada or whatever. You say the story and this film is being made only for you. Only you watch it on that evening and it will disappear after that. So isn't the biggest danger that our democracies fall apart because there's no connecting element anymore? Isn't that a bigger issue than power?
Two things there, 2 points. Like, I'm very skeptical of what that guy says because, he's also has a company to, and, product to sell, which is not working and is not making any profit whatsoever and, being invested so much. So kind of like, take what these people say with like a certain healthy level of skepticism and, we have heard this kind of stuff. And we know how it works. And because, this, as I said, a lot of this technology doesn't work. And he's trying to sell us something which doesn't work. But what you are saying is very, very true. Like, the fact that people stop meeting in the physical space, and we are so dependent on these apps, and, we congregate in, these digital spaces, and everybody at home, and, on the apps or on these platforms. I mean, to some extent, it's really good because you can connect with the whole world. But we also need to reclaim these physical spaces, and that's why I love like this thing. People coming together, like talking together in physical world and real connection, and also all this hatred which is there online. Like if people speak face to face, it's also a very different dynamic. So I think that we need to reclaim those spaces. Digital as well as physical to resist this kind of drive.
But that's good news then, isn't it? Because the answer is that's possible way out. It's very easy. It means that we have more direct interaction.
No.
It's all.
And go out and talk to people in real life rather than through those tools. Do we need to give a space to?
Thank you so much.
We will have a drink afterwards, so we can continue talking.
We can continue talking. Thank you so much, Barbora.
Andreas,
Yes?
could you sit in this chair for this second part?
For this, okay. I do what you said. So, we go straight into Helen now. Helen Taylor, please. Helen, I'm going to read all of this because that's really a lot, is an environmentalist and an ocean conservation advocate, serving as an ambassador for the Captain Paul Watson Foundation. Helen began her career as a food technologist before moving into the environmental work on the Soil Association. She later moved on to work with Tailwinds on ecotricity and at the Forest Green Rovers, the FC, which is a football club, very important. Supporting the sustainability campaigns and partnerships, and became one of the first female CEOs in professional football, which is another amazing thing. Anyway, and they are in the English Football League.
Yeah.
Since?
Well, we got dropped down.
You got a bit dropped down.
Yeah, we a little bit dropped down. We'll go back up.
So Helen founded One Blue Marble and expanding her environmental impact in deepening her work with the Captain Paul Watson Foundation and initiative like the Project One Wave. She also serves as the head of and trustee of the Green Britain Foundation and as director of the Catalyze Change.
There's a lot there, isn't there?
There's a lot. So it's all yours now.
Thank
please.
you so much.
Thank
How
you, Barbara.
lovely. Thank you so much, Andreas. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Lovely to meet you. Yes, I do quite a few things. Today I'm just going to focus on my work with the Captain Paul Watson Foundation, But I wanted to just touch on my world, which is with Ecotricity, with Dale Vince, who is the founder of Ecotricity, the world's first green energy company. We have done many things. We've worked together for 15 years now. And as part of that, as soon as I arrived, actually, we got involved in Forest Green Rovers Football Club. And it's nice to mention this. It's a fully vegan football club, the greenest football club in the world. It sits in the National League now, which is a bit lower than the English Football League. But I can say one of the most amazing times of meeting Vivienne was actually when we went to Wembley in a playoff to get ourselves actually promoted into the English Football League. And Vivienne was with us. It was quite amazing. She came out and watched the match with us. She walked back in and she said to me, is this your football club? And I went, no, we're at Wembley. She was such an advocate for anything that was going to be good from the environmental perspective. She was with us on many occasions. And I don't know if you remember, Andreas, I think there was one time we did the British Fashion Week in September, many years ago now. And we'd had these discussions about renewable energy, and we're very privileged to be powering as Ecotricity the stores, the office, head office. And what Vivienne did that year was she put every single model that went down the catwalk in a crown, and on that crown it said Ecotricity. We didn't know it was going to happen. We were absolutely blown away, and it's just always that kind of way that she was advocating for the right thing. She was pushing. She was actually at that point, I think we were talking, and I remember going to a meeting with her and Colette. We went to the British Fashion Council, and we talked to all of those big labels about it's time for you to go green, it's time for you to green energy. Wasn't it amazing? It was,
many of them did.
And many did. There was
a big change through that force, really, and that was Vivienne.
She did it.
She kept on going.
She really did, didn't she? And I remember her sitting in it was another talk, actually. It was at British Fashion College, was it, here in London, and Stella McCartney was in the audience, and she was speaking
directly to her,
and they were directly having a conversation
you
about
better
telling
her what to do.
So there've been some really amazing moments that I remember very fondly of what Vivienne has done. And then very recently, I know, Andreas, you went to meet Paul Watson. Was that the first time you met him?
No, wasn't. Second or third time. But I've met him always in Paris.
Brilliant.
Or France. Paris. And it was a great. He was so inspiring, really. It was just listening to him because he is a talker.
He is. Yes, he is.
And he he's on a mission. He's driven. He's an incredibly driven person.
Very.
He lives just like Vivienne, he lives what he says.
I agree. I think that kind of...
And that you feel immediately.
Totally.
And therefore you take yourself back, you just don't...
Yeah.
You're just here to see if you can be part of it or help, or God knows.
Yeah. You don't need the social media.
No.
You don't need to be search engineering. There's something about him, isn't there? There's something that just kind of takes you, as Vivienne, as Dale as well. There's all those individuals who are really driven, really focusing on an outcome, and are
putting big things in a perspective, in a kind of historical one, even, using what they've lived through in their past and why they arrived at this point and why they see the things in this way.
Lovely, yes.
And that that's so powerful.
Yes, he really kind of he creates that vision, doesn't he? And I don't know if you all know Paul or have come across him. Has anyone come across Paul, Captain Paul Watson?
No.
Know of him? Yes. Yes, he's having a few problems with Japan. Yes, definitely. So Captain Paul Watson, he founded what was originally Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, and that was back in 1977, so some time ago. And I believe Vivienne has known him from almost the start, really. And he was most transformed in his thinking around the fact that he'd been on a ship where he'd witnessed these whales that were being subject to being harpooned. And he actually was part of that intervention. He was at that point with Greenpeace, actually, and he'd experienced this. And something happened, and it is that magical thing that can happen where this whale was coming to his boat, and his boat could definitely have been damaged and gone under as a result of the force of this whale coming. And as the whale approached the boat, the whale just looked at Paul. There was this moment where the eyes connected, and then the whale turned and left. And from that moment, Paul has always thought he owes his life to protecting whales. That's his big mission in life. So he created Sea Shepherd for that reason, as an organisation, as a charity, as a foundation that would be there to really intercept, to stop, wherever possible, whaling, illegal fishing, and all really to defend the ocean. So that's his sort of moral compass, if you like. And I was talking in the audience just now actually about how unapologetic Paul is, because he really isn't. I mean, he will force through as is needed. He will put himself on the line. And Ben, you know, he's been in jail actually in the last year. He was commissioning a boat that was going out to go back to Japan to try and stop whaling again. There's a huge whaling ship that has been built, and the Japanese had threatened to be out in this ship. They do a lot of research, scientific research, and they use that as a kind of undercover, if you like, to go whaling. And he knew that, and he was publicly saying he was on his way out. He'd gone to Dublin and was then taking what we call the Jean-Paul de Jura, funded by the Jean-Paul de Jura, this big ship out to Japan. On the way, he stopped in Nuuk in Greenland to refuel. And lo and behold, almost as soon as he arrived, 14 officials came onto the boat, took him off the boat, and put him straight into a prison cell. And from July until July to December, 150 days he spent in jail in Nuuk, in Greenland. He was brought several times back to court to have the conversation about what was going on. And the reason Japanese were trying to pin him down is they were saying that back in 2010, while his boats were out in Japan, in the Southern Ocean, Antarctica, they were actually fielding where the whaling ships were. And on one occasion, they came very close. And in doing that, to prevent or to start to sort of intercept, they'd thrown a stink bomb onto the deck of the boat. No one was on it, actually, at the time. But what happened, of course, as you might imagine in almost cartoon world, it became very slippery very quickly and didn't smell very nice. And in a bizarre fashion, of course, what happened was that people who came back onto the deck, they could have slipped and they could have damaged themselves. They didn't. But what happened was the Japanese were saying, well, we can get you on this because you were threatening life by doing this. So the Japanese have ironically really pushed against Paul, obviously because they want to keep whaling. And they railed against him to the point that they tried to have him extradited to Japan, in which case if he'd got there, we wouldn't see him again. He would have been imprisoned for the rest of his life. He's now 77. His birthday, the day of his birthday, he was released in Nuuk very quietly before all the media arrived, because there was an expectation the next day that he would be he would be released. They quietly removed, tried to get him away. The Ministry of Justice, the Danish Ministry of Justice, stepped in on that occasion. But he would regard that as direct action. And we are, as an organisation, all about direct action. We're all about, being forceful, finding ways through to try and enable a different way of looking at things. So he was kind of proud that it happened. It gave him some thinking time. For a little while, he had a window. They were very kind to him. They had a window, and he could look out onto the ocean, and he could see the Jean-Paul de Jura, but it was irritating others. So it was eventually it was taken away, and it was taken over to Canada. But what it did is it kind of really brought home that importance of something like that, bringing worldwide awareness to an issue that, if not dealt with, i.e. if we do lose our whales, if we do lose our ocean life, there will be nothing. And as Paul would constantly say, if the ocean dies, we die.
So the whales are the gardeners of the ocean, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Churns all the plankton and the nutrients down into the bottom and up again. They dive so deep.
They are very, very important to us, yes. And actually an interesting campaign that you may know of, Ben, as well, is that there's a whole krill campaign going on now. So, actually, again, out in the Antarctica, there is an industry that is sweeping the ocean floor to collect tons and tons of krill. And if that krill is removed, that's food for penguins, for whales, for sea life generally. And that is the industrial way that our country is going, our world is going, in terms of kind of just reaping and trawling the ocean. We've seen ocean, we've seen, what damage is happening.
It's suicidal. Ridiculously suicidal. Profit.
It is again, yeah.
Can I ask, why the krill though? What is it?
So it's food. It can be for dog food, but it's also fish food. So they use it for fishing. They would use it they would use it for fishing. So they will get the krill so they can then go off and do mass industrial fishing. But they would also put it into dog food.
Because they put it back into the sea, into the ocean.
We'll go back into the ocean, but it will be decomposed.
Yeah,
it won't be the same.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
So there's such an incredible amount that's happening or going. And
Of crime.
It's a crime. Yeah. It's a crime. And one of the bigger crimes, as well as it's as big, is something that's happening not that many miles away from here in the Faroe Islands. And the dolphins. So there's pilot whales and dolphins that every year throughout no particular season now, because the climate is moving so much, the temperatures are changing. Great, enormous pods of whales will come in, and indiscriminately, once they're seen, then the residents of the Faroes will actually alert one another, and they are all trained, not all, but mainly, the men particularly, are actually trained to kill the whales. So what happens is they drive them in. So they send their jet skis out, they send their fast boats out, and they drive them into designated killing bays. And then they just harpoon, they spear them. And it's regarded as tradition, but of course, in the old days, it was done for subsistence. It was done because they needed food. And it was done in small boats, and it was not a pod. It would have been 1 or 2 whales. But now it could be up to, there was one occasion we had over 1,400 white-sided pilot whales were killed in one go. They try to avoid dolphins because they feel that's got some sort of emotional connection. So actually officially, scientifically, whales can be deemed dolphins. They are the same. So a lot of the conversations that we've been having more recently about talking about them as they are dolphins as opposed to whales, to try and get more people to be aware of what's happening. And from the Paul Watson Foundation's perspective, for the last decade, we've been out in the Faroes documenting what's happening, trying to engage with what is a very difficult nation. They have a very sort of set, forced way of doing things. They're not particularly interested at all in animal welfare. They would still describe this as, it's food, yet their freezers are full of whale meat. And we witness carcasses being thrown over the side of the cliff after they've been brought in. And they will shut schools and they will bring all the children out to sit on the bank and watch this happening. So they're indoctrinated right from the word go as to being, this is tradition, this is what you're going to do. So it's not deemed cruel. Yeah, it's only a few hundred miles away from the Scottish Highlands. It's just literally, something that is kind of barbaric in its own right, but it's still not accepted. So we do as much as possible to try and raise awareness about that and bring people's attention to it. We look for people who might know other people who live on the Faroes. We talk to musicians, to artists, to people who might be able to kind of perhaps intercept some of their minds of thinking around what's happening. Because it's difficult. You're trying to change hearts and minds, but at the same time, we want to be forceful about what we're doing. And we've done some things in the last year that may have helped, but then a lot of it, we have to kind of just work away in the background and try and reduce the numbers, if nothing else, so there's less of those whales. So it's known as the Grindrap, and that's what they describe as their killing time. In Iceland, we've worked in Iceland for a number of years. We've been successful in the last 2-3 years. So Iceland give license to still allow one whaling operator. So Christian Lofsson, whose father and forefather had a whaling station and still does in Iceland, he has persisted in whaling. So he has 2 whaling ships and he has a whaling station that he would work from. And he's been going out for many, many years. And what he's doing is actually killing fin whale. So they're endangered species, and he is collecting them basically commercially. He's been killing and then exporting to Japan. But we know, because the Japanese have got their own big whaling ship now, that there is less likelihood of them buying his whale meat, and also there's an enormous amount of whale meat there already that's still to be consumed. Now he has, in the last 2 years, not been able to whale because we've been out, and Paul has been sort of championing this by taking out boats and monitoring what's happening. So there is an official way to kill, sadly, bless you, a whale, and you must harpoon in a certain area. And the practices they were following were repetitive harpooning and very slow death. And it was deemed that we were able to kind of prove that to the government and then revoke his license to be able to do that. So he was causing pollution, and he was causing long death as a result of the way that they were operating. But again, it needs people to bring that attention to the world. It's something that we have to drive, we have to make sure people understand, because in Iceland there's very many people who would actually detest this, but Christian Lofsson's a very wealthy man, so he's got a lot of influence in that country, and that's why it's been a real challenge to even get to a point where we've been able to kind of slow things down. We haven't stopped them, but we've slowed them down. But all of this work kind of tunes to Vivienne, where she would say activism, being bold, being there to kind of to challenge the status quo. That's really what we're about. We're really about getting people to think differently, helping people understand what's going on. And in closer to home, we're doing things like we've been working very closely on a project called Project One Wave. And Project One Wave is an initiative that is more helping people here to discover what's being washed up from the ocean, washed up onto our beaches, or dropped to the bottom of the sea. So there's a lot of fishing gear that is actually discarded, and it ends up in the bottom of the ocean, and very often it gravitates to wrecks and rocks and places where it will collect. And in doing so, it starts to become that entrapment area for any marine wildlife. So it's important to remove that, but it's very difficult to find it, it's very difficult to remove it. But there are operations now where we're able to do that sort of ghost net dive and collect that, as well as look at the kind of enormous amount of fishing line, rope, net that all is being washed up onto the beaches, which then again is kind of culminated through the fact that the fishing industry is finding a quick fix through they've either lost their fishing gear accidentally, or they've thrown it over the side because they know to discard it properly is very expensive. So there is a campaign now we're working on, and thank you, Andreas, because you've been very supportive of that, is to kind of look at what can be collected and how we can bring people's attention to what is being collected, and how does that affect our behaviours, if you like. Why are we discarding things, And I would say that most people in this room are probably not discarding very much, because we all feel very similarly about what we're trying to achieve. But there's a lot of businesses, organisations, particularly businesses, who make everything with fresh virgin plastics, don't think about alternative materials. We don't need half of what is being purchased, and this whole kind of consumerism is really driving this horrendous impact on the ocean, and somehow we've got to find that balance. So we're doing small projects to look at how we can reuse materials that we find, education practices, so working with schools and groups to try and help them understand and see what's coming out of the ocean. But ultimately, somehow, we have to really drive that change, which again is Vivienne says this beautifully when she would say, you don't have to. I've got some exact words she says, and I love this. I'm going to say it at the end, I think it's here. Buy less, choose well, and make it last. And that is completely what we all have to do. So in our day-to-days, we can make those type of changes, and I'm not saying that's us, because I think many of us are already in this, but if we can engineer, make people think about how they could choose what they do differently, we will start to make that difference. And in particular, we would say that back within Eco-Trustee as well. We would say, whatever you do choose to use, choose sustainable materials, and don't keep repeat purchase. So we would look at energy, transport, food, and nature. And I'm privileged to do energy, transport, food, nature, and the ocean. So I've got all of that under my belt.
Thank you very much, Helen.
The one voice that's missing tonight, which we would really benefit from hearing from our two speakers who are talking about changing behaviour. One voice that would interject with a very powerful voice is Vivienne. Yes. So, if I may be so humble, I'd like to suggest what she would have said tonight if she were here. Yeah. It arose because she had the misfortune to see me on a film talking about a four-letter word, rent. And so she started bombarding me with questions. How does rent deal with this? How does rent deal with that? How does rent deal with the other? So I used to go along to her office in Battersea, and she would curl up on the floor with a mug of coffee, and I would pontificate about this concept of rent and how it affects behaviour, and most importantly, how, in the end, we're not going to actually achieve the changes that we need without the modification to the fiscal system that emphasises this concept of rent. Well, being a designer, of course, Vivienne bought into the idea, but she redesigned the concept, and she called it one world rent. And if you Google her name and One World Rent, you'll see the page where she discusses the concept of One World Rent. I'm not going to bore you with a lecture tonight, but I've taken this concept of One World Rent and I'm devoting 3 chapters in my next book to exploring her concept of One World Rent and how it addresses all the issues that were raised tonight and many others. Most importantly, Vivienne understood. See, she spent much of her life attacking what she called rotten capitalism. But I explained to her that phrases like that won't actually change the system. You have to hit the system at its most vulnerable point, and she got the message. And so I'm hoping that when the book is published next spring, that Vivienne's Foundation can organise a meeting where you might get a chance to read those 3 chapters and come to understand that we need that concept of one world rent if we're actually going to make a difference in the world. One world rent, right? That was Vivienne's. Where I refer to her in the book, I say there ain't nothing like a Dame. There's nothing like Dame Vivienne.
Yeah.
So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Anna. Yeah, thank you so much, Anna. It's a book club, and last time I spoke about a book, and I'm just going to mention what I'm reading at the moment. I'm not sure how everybody feels about it, but there are times when I don't really read very much. And then there are times I read a lot and I enjoy it a lot. And in this time, I'm really enjoying reading. And I actually make sure I go to bed a bit earlier just to have half an hour to read a book. I've read a couple of books of James Baldwin, which I'm sure everybody of you know. And I'm reading a biography of his, which apparently just came out this year. It's called A Love Story by Nicholas Boggs. I think he's an incredible writer. I so much enjoyed his books. I've read Giovanni's Room, I think it's called, a long, long time ago. And I'm rereading him again. And it's incredible what he has put into these books and how profound and beautiful they are. I love the language. Anyway, it's just something I'm really, really enjoying. I can't wait to get back to read it again. Anyway, that's all I wanted to share with you. So, thank you so much for coming.